Okay, so there's this quiet revolution happening right now. It's not on the streets, but inside the glass towers of our cities. And it's about to fundamentally change how millions of us work, and I bet it's not what you're thinking.
For the last few years, all we've heard about is this big debate, right? Work from home versus the office. But here's the thing. That whole conversation kind of misses the point. The real shakeup isn't about where you're plugging in your laptop. It's about what the office itself even is anymore.
And look, this is not some tiny niche trend we're talking about. We're looking at a market in India that's projected to grow by more than 25% every single year. I mean, that's an absolutely explosive shift that's changing the game for commercial real estate. So what exactly is it?
All right, let's get into it. We're talking about the new star of the corporate world, the flexible workspace. So let's break down what that actually means.
The easiest way to think about it is like Office as a service. Instead of getting locked into some super rigid long-term lease for just an empty concrete box, companies can now get a fully furnished, ready-to-go office. And the best part? The terms are flexible. They can adapt as the company's needs change. And here's why the old way of doing things is really starting to look, well, old. With a traditional lease, you're hit with these massive upfront costs for what they call fit-outs. That's all the construction, the furniture, the whole shebang. Then you're stuck in a rigid multi-year contract and you have to manage everything yourself. It's a huge headache. The flex model? It just flips that whole script. You've got low upfront costs, you can be way more agile, and somebody else handles all the day-to-day operations. It's a total game changer.
Okay, so you might be wondering, why are these massive corporations, the big players, jumping on this train? Well, the data tells a pretty compelling story. I mean, just look at this growth. The amount of flex workspace in India has just exploded. We're talking nearly tripling in just a handful of years, and it's not slowing down. It's projected to keep climbing at a staggering 20% year after year. That's the kind of momentum that doesn't just nudge an industry, it completely reshapes it.
So what's pouring fuel on that fire? Well, it comes down to a huge financial incentive. Money, right? On average, companies are saving around 20% by going flex instead of traditional. And hey, when you're talking about millions of dollars in real estate costs, a 20% saving is something you absolutely cannot ignore.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. Who's actually driving all this demand? Well, it's the IT sector, by a long shot. They are the single biggest consumer of office space in India, making up almost a third of the entire market. And it makes sense, right? They constantly need to scale teams up or down depending on the project.
And what do you know? The major flex operators are perfectly positioned to catch this wave. The IT sector makes up almost half of their client base. It's like they're custom built to serve the biggest player in the game. No wonder they're growing so fast.
But hold on. It's really important to note that not all flex space is created equal. That term can actually be a little misleading. To really get what's going on, we need to pop the hood and look at the real engine that's driving all this change.
Pay close attention to this, because this is a really key distinction. See, when most of us hear flex space, our minds jump to co-working, right? Shared desks, freelancers, maybe a few small startups. But that's not the big story here. The real growth, the powerhouse, is in what's called managed offices. We're talking private, totally customized spaces for huge companies, often for over 100 people, with more stable, longer-term deals.
And the numbers, they scream it from the rooftops. Co-working grew at a solid 16%, which is great, but the managed office segment, it's been on an absolute tear, rocketing up by 47% every year. So yeah, this story isn't about startups anymore. This is about big, serious, corporate business.
So how do these operators actually get all this office space? Well, it pretty much boils down to two main ways. First, you have the straight lease. That's where the operator just leases the space like a regular tenant. They take on all the risk, but they also keep all the profit. But then there's this other model that's getting super popular called managed aggregation. Here, it's more of a partnership. The landlord actually chips in to help fund the fit-out, and in return, they get a slice of the revenue. They share the risk, but they also share in the success.
All right, let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture. We're going to see how this whole market came to be, where the hot spots are, and why the model in India specifically seems to be built for the long haul.
Yeah, this definitely didn't just pop up out of nowhere. If you rewind a decade, flex space was pretty much just boring old business centers. Then, from 2015, we saw the rise of co-working, aimed squarely at startups. But the real turning point,
The big catalyst was the post-COVID era. That's when huge companies started using this core plus flex strategy. Basically, they keep a smaller main HQ, but then use these flexible satellite offices to grow or shrink their footprint whenever they need to.
And when you look at a map of this boom, it's really concentrated in a few key places. Bengaluru is the undisputed king, the epicenter of it all, with almost a third of the entire market. Right behind it, you've got the other major tech and business hubs, Pune, Hyderabad, and Gurgaon. Between them, they make up another huge chunk of the pie.
Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room. WeWork. For anyone whose mind immediately goes to their spectacular collapse, this is a really important point. See, WeWork's global model failed because they were locked into these crazy long-term leases and were just burning through cash on super luxe fit-outs. But there's another global player, IWG, who succeeded by being smart. They used a capital-light model with strict cost controls. And here's the key. Indian operators are wisely following IWG's playbook, not WeWork's. They're building sustainable businesses for the long term.
So, where is all of this headed? What's the end game here? Because this trend is so much more than just a new way to rent some desks. It's forcing us to fundamentally rethink what an office even is. And if there's one big idea to take away from all this, it's this. The office is no longer just a place. It's becoming a service. The whole mindset is shifting away from real estate as a physical asset, something you buy or lease for years, and towards space as a service, something you consume and pay for as you need it. It's turning from a product into a utility, just like your electricity or internet.
And you don't have to take my word for it. The head of Office, one of India's biggest operators, said it perfectly. He said companies aren't just looking for space anymore. They're looking for partners who can deliver the entire workspace solution, from the initial design all the way to running it day to day. That whole fit-out process we talked about, it's not just a setup cost anymore. It's a core part of the service they're selling.
Which, of course, leaves us with one last really fascinating question to chew on. If a company can basically outsource everything, I mean everything, related to its physical office to an expert, then what happens to the traditional massive corporate HQ, the one they run themselves? Are we actually watching the beginning of the end for the corporate headquarters as we know it?